welcome to the next episode of our podcast, Recruitment Revolution. And I am delighted today to be joined by Sharon MacArthur, otherwise known as Miss Menopause. And Sharon and I have worked together before when we were doing our virtual roundtables in the pandemic, and we had such a great time that I've invited her back to speak on today's podcast. So Sharon, why don't you introduce yourself and give us, our listeners, a little bit of background about you?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Kelly. So my name is Sharon MacArthur, but my company is Miss Menopause. So if anyone sees me in the street, I answer to both. And I can hardly believe it, but I set up Miss Menopause over 7 years ago now.
Wow.
And when I set up Miss Menopause, nobody wanted to talk to me about menopause in the workplace. And now I've decided with my tongue in my cheek that maybe I'm a genius. And my mission really is just to make menopause business as usual. And I know when we were chatting, yesterday, I kind of said one of my missions is to be made redundant, because really, I just want menopause to be business as usual. So one day I hope that will happen and you won't need me anymore, and that will be brilliant.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but I work with companies, up and down the country, large and small, from huge brands right through to SMEs and everybody in between. And I really want to just get the word out there so women can work and live through menopause. Businesses can be much more profitable, keep the best people, and retain them. And that would just be brilliant all around, wouldn't it?
It would. And I think the reason that I wanted you to come on here today is because a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment when we go out and meet with business leaders is having conversations around employees and supporting their well-being and their mental health. And I think a lot of business leaders do really well with kind of well-being as a whole. But actually, when you filter it down in terms of the specifics of what that entails and who they're supporting, this is one of those topics that I think a lot of business leaders will admit and go, do you know what? I think I sort of fall short a little bit on supporting our sort of workforce through the menopause, whether that's the male or the female contingent.
Sure.
So I think it's very prevalent at the moment. There's a lot of people talking about it. So I thought what we'd do in the first instance is let's assume nobody knows what the menopause is.
Yeah.
And let's start with, well, what is the menopause and what are the different stages?
What is the menopause? What a question. The first thing to say is every single reproducing female on the planet is going to go through menopause because ultimately it means the end of your fertility. That's ultimately what we're talking about here. But medically, and this is where it gets really complicated because there's all these other medical terms flying around. So the word menopause medically just means this and only this, that the individual has not had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. So if somebody has a cheeky period at month 11, you've got to go back to the start and count again. But where it doesn't really seem to fit in a number of doctor surgeries up and down the country is I think doctors have They've got this number in their head, and the number is average age of 51. So there's this magical number which is cited not just in the UK but across Europe and most of North America, where the average age of menopause for women is 51. So this horrible thing keeps happening to lots and lots of women. I've met many of them up and down the country the last 7 years, where women will go up to their doctor's surgery. They'll be maybe in their mid 40s. They'll say, I think I might be menopausal, and their doctor says to them they're too young. That is kind of rubbish. So we need to understand that for many, many women, and also maybe those employers out there who might think, and there's a phrase I'm going to use, women of a certain age. It's my least favorite phrase, can I just say? And everybody uses it, but it's not very good, because a really important point you need to know about menopause is that technically menopause could happen to women at any age.
Yeah.
And the saddest case I've read about, Kelly, is it was a young girl of 12.
Oh, wow.
I know. And that's exceptional, but it just goes to prove and demonstrate that technically menopause could happen to women at any age. And then, go on.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, health conditions can also force you into early menopause as well. So I know somebody who had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And as part of the various treatment and operations she had, she was forced into early menopause at the age of 35, which hit her like a train.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point that you make. So there's a couple of statistics. Well, there's a statistic I'll give you, and then I'll just add on to that. So there's this horrible statistic out there which says 1 in 100 women will go through early menopause. Now, there will be an amount of women out there who have what I call a predetermination for an early natural menopause. And what you might be thinking, well, what's early menopause? Well, it tends to be anybody under the age of 45. So I remember somebody saying to me, well, one of my best friends, I think it was at about the age of 47, 48, saying, Sharon, do you not think you're menopausal? And I was outraged. I was like, how dare you think that could be menopausal? Because probably like a lot of people, this is about 10 years ago, I thought menopause only happened to women who were really, really old, like in their 80s. So in my mind's eye, whatever that menopause thing was, it certainly wasn't going to happen to me. So there's like I say, this horrible statistic where I want people to think about it like this. For every 100 women that you meet, statistically, one in 100 will be going through menopause that you would never have imagined. And that's a really, really important point. And the most saddest and common reasons, and I'm pleased that you brought that up, Kelly, that reason when we'll go through early menopause, is something called POI and POS. So there are a couple of special medical terms that are often reserved only for those women under the age of 40. Right. So POI stands for, wait for it, premature ovarian insufficiency. I mean, wow. Who came up with that? And then we've got another one, POF, and I don't mean plenty of fish, and it stands for premature ovarian failure. We'll stick with POI and POF. And they, as I say, are reserved for women under the age of 40. And so the most common reason, as you've already pointed out, is the most common reason is for chemical and medical reasons. So I'm talking hysterectomies, cancer treatments, exactly as you've described. And so for those women, they haven't had, years or months to get used to the idea of menopause. Literally, for those individual women, the day after, they're plunged into an overnight menopause. So literally, they've had the hormones ripped from their body and they're plunged directly into menopause. So you can imagine how catastrophic that almost is, because it happens within 24 hours. And for example, I met a woman and I couldn't decide whether she was daft or clever because she was being sent for a full hysterectomy and she wanted to read all of her literature. Now, if it had been me, I would have stuck my head in the sand and thought, oh, I'd rather be in blissful ignorance. But she wanted to understand all about it. So she said, I'm reading through all this literature. And she came across, she said it wasn't even a paragraph, it was like a sentence. And it just kind of said menopause. And she didn't have a clue what we're talking about. So she said, I went back to my medical team and went back to speak to a surgeon who happened to be a he. Obviously, it could have been anybody. And his response was like this. He went, oh, yes, he went for you. That would be a couple of hot flushes and you'll be done. and exactly. And then her own words, this poor woman said, Sharon, when I woke up, I thought I was dying because she was so overwhelmed with symptoms. So I'm certainly not here to beat up anybody in the medical profession. I am an absolute fangirl of anybody who chooses to, look after care, and help somebody through their own issues when it comes to healthcare. But the sad truth of it is, right now in the 21st century, in 2025, it's certainly a postcode lottery up and down the country for women who are trying to manage their own menopause, and that's what makes it really, really difficult. But to go back to your original question, like what else does it mean? So remember, the word menopause just means that the individual hasn't had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. Then there's this other word which you may or may not have heard or term, and it's called perimenopause. So a number of people out there may be thinking, well, I don't know what that's all about. Well, let me describe it in my Sharon MacArthur way, in very simple terms. I like to describe it. It's when the magic begins. It's when the magic.
That's a very kind term.
Well, it is. It's when the magic begins. And the really interesting point about perimenopause is this, and it is a really important point, that the majority of women out there will begin to encounter symptoms of menopause months and even years before they've noticed a change in their periods. That's if they're even having them. And so what makes me really professionally grumpy about the whole world of menopause is the terms that we use haven't really been brought into the 21st century, because most women, quite rightly so, they're tapping into contraception. Mirena coils, mini pills, depot injections, which means they're not even having regular periods. So how on earth are you supposed to know that what's happening here could be related to this menopause thing here? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story. Excuse me. So my menopause began when I was about 47, nearly 48. And what it meant was my first things that began to happen to me was I began to wake up with night terrors. Now, I wouldn't wish night terrors on my own worst enemy. It was absolutely horrible. So I'd be waking up 4 o'clock in the morning, absolutely wide awake, and I couldn't understand why on earth that was happening. Now, I used to be a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company. So in my big, nasty corporate job, I used to often get so stressed I couldn't sleep sometimes. So I thought, well, maybe it's work. So when I looked around and thought, well, is it work that's bothering me? I realised my boss was amazing because it was me. So I knew there wasn't anything really untoward happening at work. And everything was going on well with him and Dawes, well as it could be after 20 odd years together. And thankfully, as quickly as these things manifested themselves, they went quite quickly. That was great. And then as an oversharer, let me tell you what happened next. I began to wake up really, really hot in the night. Now, up until this point, my other half would have said I could have slept through a hurricane. So in other words, nothing would have woken me from my sleep. And now I'm wide awake in the middle of the night. And then the next thing that began to happen was the heating wars. Well, the heating wars used to rage on in our house. So I was always freezing. He was always really hot. And now I became so hot, I felt I could have shed my skin like a snake. I was like, I could have ripped my skin off. I felt so hot. And then I'd always been jealous of what I'm going to describe as my sweaty girlfriends. So what I mean by that is if I've ever been to a class or a gym and I've been working out, some of my friends have said, Sharon, are you not even trying? Because as hard as I work out, I just don't perspire. But I'm so incredibly lucky because when it comes to menopause, some women out there are going to be kept so hot through the day and through the night. They're carrying big bags of clothing around with them, or they're stripping their bed sheets through the night. And the worst I heard was a woman who told me her sweats were lasting up to an hour.
Wow.
Now, I know, well, I can't even imagine that because mine would last about 5 minutes, and that used to feel like 5 minutes too long. So what would happen was I'd eventually get so hot, I'd end up ripping the covers off him and Dawes. Then I'd run around the bedroom several times thinking about putting my boobs against a cold window to get some light relief because I was so incredibly hot. Then eventually I'd get so cold, I'd have to jump back into bed, I'd do a crocodile death roll, steal the quilt back, and quickly go back to sleep. Now, a really, really important thing to know is my other half thinks I'm peculiar. And whilst that could be true on many levels, apparently I can fall asleep mid-sentence when he's talking to me. I've said...
I think that's called narcolepsy, isn't it?
Well, I've said he shouldn't be so boring. He reckons not. But the point is, I might have had maybe 1, 2, 3 of these episodes in the night, and I'd quickly go back to sleep. Guess what? He never went back to sleep. So in all seriousness, when I talk about menopause, the work that I've been doing in the last 18 months has been very heavily based around manufacturing and very, very male-dominated businesses. So I would say to maybe some of the listeners, you might be thinking, well, you know, I run an engineering firm, you know, there's 30 mostly men in here, we don't need to do anything about menopause. So I'd ask you to think about it like this. If most of your male colleagues identify as male heterosexual, I can guarantee that at some point in their lifetime, they will be going home to menopausal wives, partners and girlfriends.
Yep.
So all the while these things were happening to me, like I say, I was still having regular periods. So my question to you all is, how on earth are you supposed to know that what's happening here could be related to this menopause thing here? So how it was going in my household, it was really affecting our relationship together, because my other half would be going, I'll keep me awake, running around, I can't concentrate at work, I can't sleep properly, I can't really think straight, and I'd be going, I think I've got a terrible bug. So I had absolutely no clue that what was happening to me here was the beginning of this menopause thing over here. So the term that we're now going to give it is perimenopause. So I'll just reiterate what I said. So the majority of women out there are going to begin to have symptoms of menopause months and even years before they notice a change in their periods. That's if they're even having them, because remember, a large community out there of women will be using contraception. So how are you supposed to figure it all out? But
I think one of the things, so a couple of people that I know, I would say, and we talk quite openly, are perimenopausal at the moment. And one of them, one of her symptoms was anxiety. And that kind of came a bit left field for her. I would have said she was always a bit of an overthinker anyway, naturally. But suddenly her anxiety went through the roof. Her confidence levels dipped. She was doubting herself in all aspects of her life. And I think that's one of those symptoms that people just put down to stress. But actually, it is a symptom of the perimenopause, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, the number one symptom reported to me in the last 7 years, anxiety. That is the number one symptom. So there might be many listeners today thinking, well, we've done an awful lot of work around mental health and well-being. Quite rightly so. That's a brilliant thing to have done. But the thing is that if you're not including menopause in the conversation, then potentially you've got a big, big hole. And let me tell you the saddest thing that women say to me, and this has been consistently in the last 7 years. Sharon, I thought I had early onset dementia.
Yeah.
And what's really utterly terrifying about that thought process for most women is when you probably look or ask around in the family, most of us will find we've got dementia somewhere in our family history. So how utterly terrifying does that become? And even simple things like driving to the shops might begin to seem utterly terrifying. And you hear women saying all the time, I've lost my confidence.
Yes.
So, you might even know some of these women, like you say, there could be colleagues, there could be friends, there could be family members of yours. And they're saying things like, I've lost my confidence. And why this is really a business issue and why really the listeners really need to think about this perhaps a bit more deeply is we've got an aging workforce, we've got an aging population. And one day women are waking up feeling a bit meh. I'm feeling anxious. I'm not sleeping very well. I can't remember the name for this thing. It's a thingy. It's a thingy. I've put my keys in the kettle this morning. I've gone over here and I haven't got a clue why I've gone over there. So in the early stages, women are rocking into work, hoping that nobody notices that they're not feeling 100%. Now, you might say to me, Sharon, well, you're not a bad presenter. Could you come and present to my business or my part of the business? And today I'm going, no, send Kelly, because today I'm utterly terrified that I might forget my own name in a sentence. So if I ever refer to something called brain fog, what I mean is the inability to remember simple words and phrases that you know.
Yeah. And it's that thing of when people, and I've even done it, when you sit there and go, that word has just fallen out of my head.
Yes.
Like it was there and I got to the end of the sentence and I can't remember it anymore.
No. Well, I had this episode. This is during lockdown, so I thought it was lockdown, but it wasn't. And I just worked for me, and I came in and I came up to my laptop, and I thought, I don't know what the login is. So I don't know why, but I closed the lid. I thought, well, I'll open the lid again. It'll come back to me. And literally, I had to. Thankfully, I was working for myself. I couldn't remember it all day. I came in the day after. It came back by magic. And that is not uncommon. So imagine how terrifying that is and why women begin to believe that they're starting to get early onset dementia, because like your laptop password, this is a thingy, it's a thingy, it's a cup, but I can't remember that right now. So so that's the least of your worries really from a workplace point of view. But really what's happening more than anything is women are waking up one day, putting two and two together, coming up with 46 and telling themselves that they're no longer capable. So again, like I say, you might know some of these women a bit like your friend, colleagues, friends, family members. And usually within less than 6 months, they put two and two together, come up with 46, told themselves they're no longer capable, and then leaving.
Yes.
So all that talent, all that knowledge, all that expertise is drifting away out of utter ignorance because those women are not associating what's happening to their minds and bodies with this life event called menopause because nobody's told us. No. So if you think about it, if you're a small business and maybe you've got, let me tell you an interesting story. So I was working with this guy. I was talking about menopause. He went, Sharon, I don't think this is going to be really necessary in my business because I've got about 30 guys. We turn over about 4 million. We're doing really well. He said, but wait for this. He said, but we've only got 2 women. And I said, only 2 whole real live women? You've only got 2? And he went, yeah. I said, well, put it like this. I said, I'm going to make this up and see how right or wrong I am. I said, I imagine that those 2 whole women that you've got probably do things like your administration and probably do things like your payroll and maybe any HR stuff. And he was like, how have you guessed that? I said, well, it's just a lucky guess. I said, and I'm imagining, because you've been going quite some time, that those two whole women have probably been with you for quite a number of years, have they? He went, yes, over 10 years. I said, well, let's just imagine that one day they both begin to wake up feeling a bit rubbish. And after 6 months, they say to you, both together, almost at the same time, I'm gonna lay it on thick here. They both come to you and say, look, I don't think I can do this work anymore. I think I'm losing my mind. I think I've got early onset dementia. And I think I'm going to leave. How would your business run without those two women? He was like, well, I couldn't even consider that. That would be horrific. You know, they're totally integral to what I do. I said, so therefore, do you not owe it to yourself? Do you not owe it to those women? And do you not owe it to those men who I'm telling you, I know you can't see menopause, but I'm telling you they are going home to menopausal wives, partners and girlfriends. So think about it like this. Think about if they're operating equipment, machinery, they're drivers, what health and safety risk might those men become because they're sleep deprived because they're living with menopausal women at home? I said, what about those men? You've told me you've been doing some great work around mental health. What about those men who are telling you they're feeling anxious, worried, concerned? And the root cause is their relationships are falling apart at home.
Yep.
So, you know, I met a guy about 6 months ago, and I guess it's a bit of a sad story. So I was running a session, and he came to see me at the end and he said, Sharon, when you were talking, I kind of had light bulbs going off in my head. He said, but I feel really quite incredibly sad about it because I only wish I'd met you about 3 years earlier. Because I said, I truly believe it's the reason my 27-year-old marriage has ended, because I didn't know anything about menopause and neither did my wife. So I'm gutted that I know this stuff now, but if I'd known about that sooner, it might have saved my marriage. And that's the power of learning about menopause. So I want people who are listening to understand and appreciate that menopause has tentacles that reach into the corners of every single person's life. So, you know, don't just think it's women of a certain age, oh, I don't need to do anything about that. Because maybe you've got a business where it's maybe all guys and you've got a couple of younger women who are employed by you. It impacts everybody. So let me just go to young people. So young people are the lifeblood of every business, aren't they? We need young people to join our businesses. They're really the future. So let me tell you an interesting story I had about a younger woman who came to one of my sessions not too long ago. So she was really quiet. Till eventually she said, I think, you know what, Sharon, I think my mum might be going through the menopause. And I went, right, oh, okay. Now, what's really interesting about that is statistically, we know that women are having children later in life.
Yeah.
We know that's true, don't we? And we also know that now young people are really struggling to leave their family home because it's too bloody expensive.
Yeah.
So she said, when I left for work this morning, she was in her early 20s, I would say. She said, when I left for work this morning, my mother threw a butter dish at my head. And I was like, well, that's not like a common sign of menopause that I've come across. But I take your point. She said, I love me mum. I really love her a bit. She said, but these are her words, not mine, by the way, Kelly. She went, she's turned into a hell beast. She went, she's shouting at me. She's like, just throwing things around. She said, and although I love her, I don't want to spend any time with her anymore. So really what was really interesting about this younger woman, could have been a younger guy, coming to a session about menopause, this woman was able to go home and have an open, honest adult conversation with her mum who didn't know she was in the early stages of menopause. And what's really interesting about this is often we might spot signs in others long before they spot signs in themselves.
Yeah.
So she was able to encourage her mother to go down what I'm going to call a medical route. She ended up on hormone replacement therapy, HRT. So not only as a younger woman was she now prepared for her own menopause. Remember, 1 in 100 women will enter menopause, you know, under the age of 40. It could have been her. She's now more prepared. But what it did was it transformed the relationship between her and her mum. So you had a much happier, more engaged employee, all because she came to a session about menopause.
And I think this is the important thing is that, and I know you talk about this quite a lot, you know, not every female has a baby. No. But 100% of females will go through the menopause at some point in their life. Mm-hmm. And the challenge that I find is every single business that I work with has an in-depth maternity and paternity policy, and it's that thing of, right, you're pregnant, what can I do to help? Do you want a fan? Do you want to sit near a window? Do you want a footrest? Like, have regular breaks? Let me put you near the toilet, it's whatever you need. And it seems to be a little bit like they'll help you because that's like in 9 months they can quantify it. I can support you for that 9-month pregnancy, and then we're done. Because I've got to get to the end. Whereas the perimenopause, going through the menopause, that post, actually, you can't define how long that's going to be. But actually, what I find frustrating is, if not all women have babies, why are we okay to talk about pregnancy and pregnancy-related symptoms and hormone changes? And because I know I've had 2 kids, and I don't think I was too bad. But if you ask my husband, it might be a different story. But I'm fully aware that I did change into a different person. And actually, post-baby, when you have baby brain again, people forgive you for being forgetful and not sleeping properly and being tired. And so why is it acceptable around babies? But then nobody dares speak about the menopause or kind of, like you say, that brain fog, that anxiety, that fear, the sort of being up in the night and not sleeping properly, and the insomnia. And there's so many symptoms that, and I think as human beings, we put off as something else. But like you said, it's a postcode lottery with your GPs in terms of who's actually going to sit and listen to you to go, actually, this could be the perimenopause or whatever it might be. And I think, again, it's that thing of, I remember talking to my mum, and she didn't say she had any symptoms whatsoever. She just knew she'd gone through the menopause when her period stopped. So for her, she was like, I've had my last period, never had another one again. She's like, I got through that easy. And I remember years later speaking to my grandma going, did you have any menopause symptoms? And she went, I can't really remember going through it. One of the things, and again, I'm oversharing, both my mum and my gran are not here anymore, so I don't need to worry about embarrassing them. So I can chat about this. My gran said she lost all the hairs off her legs.
Right.
So she never had to shave her legs ever again.
Every cloud?
I mean, I was like, that's a win-win for me.
Exactly.
But neither of them remember having any symptoms. But the one thing that you've said that springs to mind when we talk about the anxiety thing and that fear. So I'm originally from Manchester, and we live on the Yorkshire coast now. And for years growing up, my mum and my stepdad used to drive us backwards and forwards to Manchester all the time to see family. My real dad was still over there. And there was the point as an adult where my mum got the fear of motorways and refused to drive on a road she didn't know or a motorway. And I had to do it. The anxiety and the fear and how nervous and anxious she became in a car was crippling her. Yet this is a woman who worked in retail for one of the largest supermarkets in the UK as a national trainer, and as her working life travelled the length of the UK, training new starters in jobs and different departments, but then suddenly this fear of travelling on motorways and this anxiety and kind of, she just became a different person. And when I think about the timeline, it all makes sense.
Well, that's what I say. It's a really common thing. Fear of driving, like, I can't do that. So again, like you say, you might need to go to the shops to get your shopping, so even simple things like that. You might not even be a national trainer and that's part of your job, but if it is, it probably means you're going to have to think about leaving your job. If you're a driver. And it's interesting, you've got me going now, Kelly. So if I think about, when I think about my mum and my grandma, so if you think about my mum's generation, they either worked part-time or they didn't work at all, but certainly my grandma, again, who's no longer with us. So if I'd asked them, what about your menopause? They would have said something like, petting our day, we just got on with it. Now, I'm not being mean about me mum and me grandma, but their biggest stressor would often be, would they boil the potatoes over for the tea? That would be it. So if they were having a bad day, they could lie down on the settee. Now, everybody in the 21st century, if you've got 2 humans that can go out and work full time in the 21st century, because everything's so bloody expensive, you probably need to have 2 humans working in your household at the very least to afford just the basics of things these days. So can you afford the women in your lives, whether they're your employees, your friends, your family, to think, I've just got to pack in work now? And the root cause was menopause. And what's brilliant about menopause is, in the work that I've been doing the last 7 years, I haven't met a woman yet who said, Sharon, I've tried everything and none of it's worked. So a really key message I need you to take away from today is menopause is to be managed, not to be endured. You do not get a prize for doing nothing. And just really to go to the point, so I've talked about menopause, which is not had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. Perimenopause, remember, it's at the beginning when the magic begins. Some women bleed more and some women bleed less, let me tell you. So me, for example, I was in the bleed less camp. So I'd had regular light periods up until perimenopause, and in perimenopause, I could go 3 months, 4 months, 5 months without a period. And then at month 5, have such a catastrophic period, I couldn't leave the house. Now, that had never happened to me until I got to perimenopause. So again, think of the people in your lives and think, could that happen to them? And what impact might that have on them, and perhaps also your business? And what might you do to help and support them? But did you know some people bleed more? So I'd met a woman who I thought was having a terrible time because she said she'd bled every day for 3 months, which I thought was really rough. And then I met a woman who was like, this, Sharon, I can beat that. And I said, oh, really? She went, yes, I bled every day for a year.
My mum did. Yeah, so my mum had a year and then it stopped. But she did every day for a year and it drove her nuts, and then it just stopped and that was it. She was done.
Yeah, well, anemia, I mean, imagine how terrible that person's going to feel when you bleed every day for a year, what impact it's having on your life. So you can only say you're menopausal medically, or be told you're menopausal, when you have not had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. And then there's another term, so it is the gift that keeps on giving. So I wonder if anybody's heard of the term post-menopause. Well, when I heard about it, Kelly, I was super excited. I was like, on my calendar, oh, tomorrow is the day I have not had a period for 12 consecutive calendar months. So when I wake up tomorrow, what will it be like? Will it be like a Disney movie? Will rockets and fireworks go off? You know, is the sun going to shine forever? A bit like your mum, oh, I'm not a period now. And then I read on, and all post-menopause means, so it's a really important point you need to be aware of, is the individual is no longer having periods, but all of their symptoms can go on and on and on and on. So this is why I've met women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who are still telling me, because of the catastrophic loss of their hormones that ended their fertility, they are still being negatively impacted by menopause.
Yeah.
Now anybody who's listening today, who loves the process, anyone love a process, I'm here to tell you menopause isn't one of them. So exactly like you described, Kelly, menopause doesn't follow a linear route. So exactly like pregnancy, you can almost say that's a bit of a process, because usually within 9 months, a baby appears in most cases. That's what usually happens. Menopause hasn't got a process. And once you're menopausal, a really important point, again, I need to make to you is, once you're menopausal, that individual is menopausal for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So once fertility has ended through menopause, you are menopausal from that point on, whatever age that might be. And I'm going to try and describe to you menopause in a very simple way as a train track. Now, when I'm working with real companies, they love it when I describe it like a train track. So I want you to think of menopause as a train track. So track 1 and track 2. Now, the simple part of the menopause description is menopause itself, that every single reproducing female on the planet, whether they like it or not, their fertility will end, usually no later than 55. But many, many women will begin their menopause journey, we're going to call that perimenopause now, in and around their 40s. The difficult track 2, is the symptoms, because nobody can tell you, A, whether you're going to have symptoms, and B, when they will come, how long they will last, and whether they will come and go. So an example I need to give to you is, my mother last year at 75 began to get hot flushes for the first time after 20 years.
Wow.
So they can come and go. You may be one of those lucky, I'm going to call it the 20% club, because did you know that 20% of women worldwide will say they've had little or no symptoms? So that's really brilliant, but those women are in a bit of what I'm going to call a privileged position, and they have a quite unique experience compared to what I'm going to call the 80%. So most women out there will be in my club, the club I'm going to call the 80% club. And that means when asked the question, is menopause negatively impacting the quality of your life? They say, yes, it's had a negative impact and it's not the best. So it's really important that we get that message out that menopause is to be managed, not to be endured. And I think going back to the point that you said about, most businesses, however large or small they have a pretty decent process for the disclosure of pregnancy, but yet we don't have the equivalent for menopause. And what percent is menopause? Well, menopause is 100%. It's 100%.
And I think the thing is there's really simple things that businesses can do, can't they?
Absolutely.
When you do think about how you support pregnancy, actually flip it on its head. And there's, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. If you're an SME and you're a small business, whether you have one employee or 1,000, the things that you can do to support the men and women with this are relatively low cost most of the time. Yes, you've got to get your policies and procedures in place, and you want to make sure that they are correct and supportive and get the right advice on that. But actually, in terms of implementing really, really simple things, that's an easy win, isn't it?
Well, most of what I'm going to say is, and hopefully this will be music to everyone's ears, most of the things that you're going to need, you've already got.
Yeah.
I'll say it again, most of the things you're going to need, you've already got. And I'm going to be a little bit controversial as well, Kelly, and say, the other thing I'm going to say to businesses out there, consider that you don't need a menopause policy or a process. And I'm going to back up why I'm saying what I'm saying. So the reason I say that is most companies out there will want to say about themselves that they're inclusive employers. We're striving to be an inclusive employer, quite rightly so. But think about it like this. If you write a standalone menopause policy, are you in danger of becoming an exclusive employer?
Yeah.
Because what about John, who's got diabetes? Joan told you last year she had cancer. Have you written a diabetes policy? Have you written a cancer policy? I bet you haven't. So why do you feel that you have to write a menopause policy? And often when you look at things like tribunal cases, the reason tribunals are often won is because the process that you wrote, you didn't follow your own process. So what I'm suggesting to businesses, whether I'm working with 10,000 people in a business or whether I'm working with, 10, I've made up a word. Why don't you menopausalize your current processes? So why don't you take the ones you've already got? Because how many of your people are saying, Kelly, I can't wait for you to write another process said no human ever in the world. So why don't you stitch menopause into the ones you've already got? So an example would be, most companies will now have probably something like a return to work process, policy, plan, whatever you want to call it, where you work. So, the reason for having that is because when people are absent, when people are late, you want to sit down with them and you want to understand, because the symptom that you're seeing is the absence or the lateness. What we don't know is the reasons why. So imagine if you stitched menopause into that current policy, that could be the reason, the root cause behind the absence.
Yeah.
So what we want to try and do is we want to simplify our businesses and make things the same, not different. So if we can stitch things together that people are familiar with, you stand no chance of getting so when I'm doing that, it's the same as that.
Yeah.
Yes. And you hear the pennies dropping. Another example I'll give you is the disclosure of pregnancy. So I'll tell you a daft story, and this really happened. So when I first set up on Miss Menopause, and I was actually storming down the office into this business, and a woman kind of leapt out from me. She went, Sharon, I think I'm menopausal. I went, all right, okay. She went, I get really hot. Well, it's quite a common thing to get really hot through menopause. She said, so I've asked my line manager if I can have a fan. So her line manager, so this is another reason why not to have a policy. My manager's checked the policy, and I can have one, but only if I'm pregnant.
Wow.
So that's the ridiculousness of some managers and leaders out there. I'm sure nowhere where you all work would look at the policy and go, unless it's written in black and white, well, you can have it because it's on the list. It's not on the list. You're not coming in. You can't have it. So exactly what you said, and this is what I'm preach and bang on about all the time. Take what you currently have in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit and then flip and apply it. So a great example would be the disclosure of pregnancy, like you say. So if somebody disclosed a pregnancy around where you are right now, what might you do if you're my line manager? Well, you might give me a car parking space near the office if you thought that was appropriate. You might give me a footrest or a desk fan, and you'll do a workstation review. You might do, if you work in a uniform part of a business, you might look at my uniform. You might allow me for time off for appointments. So what I'm saying is, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not starting from scratch. All you have to do is look in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit that I know you've got, and then flip and apply. What you're probably missing in your business is the information and the knowledge around menopause. And I guess that's exactly why I set up Miss Menopause 7 years ago. But I believe, certainly in the last couple of years, it's brilliant. There's a lot more noise. There's a lot more people speaking about menopause. But I do personally feel that there's a lot of fear and complexity being sold into this space. So I'm here to tell you all, it should be no cost or low cost. Most of the things that you need, you already have. And what you're probably missing is an education for anybody and everybody to learn about menopause. And I guess that's why and how Miss Menopause came around, because I insist that when I'm running a session, some people will say, oh, you need special training for managers, or oh, we need champions. I'm saying again, don't have any of that stuff, because in the 21st century, great companies trust each other. People trust each other. They feel like I can say anything. They feel psychologically safe. So imagine how great it would be if you could get everybody in a room and you could all learn together at the same time. And again, that's what I insist upon, because we shouldn't have secret squirrel where my manager's having some information that I'm not having. What I wonder what they're learning that I'm not learning. I'm saying let's treat everybody as equal and let's give everybody the same information. So after the event, we can all come out and have an open, honest, adult conversation with each other. Yeah, because that's how you're going to make menopause business as usual, just by talking about it.
And I think it's not overcomplicating it. No. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You just need to start with having conversations and make it okay to have them conversations rather than, and you and I have probably seen it happen all the time, somebody will sit there and go, I've been up all night, hot flushes, and somebody else rolls their eyes and goes, oh, God, again, another one. Yeah. That's not acceptable. And actually, if that person was pregnant, you would be like, right, what can I do to help you? So why would you not help this person? And if you have to do things like maybe look at working hours, hybrid working, or like you say, putting a fan there, or making sure that they've got access to water and, just simple. Like you say, time off for appointments and things like that. You shouldn't have to necessarily come in with a hospital letter to say, I'm having a pregnancy scan. It should be, actually, I've got a GP appointment to review my HRT or whatever it might be, or I'm seeing somebody about this, or, I'm struggling, so I might need some counselling and I need time off to attend counselling sessions. And, there's all different things that people need support with, but they shouldn't be ashamed that they can't tell you.
No, but I just want to say, because I come from a commercial background, and so what I think is happening in the 21st century, a lot of companies feel that maybe what they have to do is they have to help me to death. Yeah. So what I'm going to say is to managers and leaders of the world and business owners is let's imagine you're all my line manager today and I want to disclose my pregnancy to you. And you might think, well, when might that happen? Well, it's a bit like Martini. It could be any time, any place, anywhere. It could be in a regular one-to-one. It could be in a wellbeing chat. It could be casually over a cuppa. So what I hope would happen, because I always think this is best practice, that you and I could sit down and have an open, honest, adult conversation where you hear my story. Now, I always say I don't believe managers and leaders are paid to have all the answers, but I truly believe everyone is paid to listen in that position. Yes. Yes. And you're gonna hear my story, which is going to be unique to me, because every single person is going to have a unique experience of menopause. So what I hope would happen is that you and I could sit down and have that open, honest, adult conversation where you hear my story, and that between us we come up with the opportunity for some small, reasonable adjustments. Yeah. Now remember, we've already said they're in your business already. So what you all have to do is you have to look in your small, reasonable adjustment toolkit and flip and apply it. So what you say is right, Sharon. I think what we've just agreed between us in this conversation is what I can do to support and help you is A, B, and C. But before I wrap up the conversation, this is where you might have to feel you've got to get a little bit brave, but it's essential that you do this, is say to me, but Sharon, what do you intend to do about this at the same time? Because let's be honest, even if you're offering me the most incredible, reasonable adjustments in the workplace, as the gift that keeps on giving, menopause is going to be with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what I'm saying is, yes, as an organisation, as a business, you have an element of duty of care. That is true. If you're a business owner, manager, leader in your business, you also have an element of duty of care. But I want you to be assured that I often say the biggest duty of care might want to sit with me, the individual.
Yeah.
Because like I say, unless I'm prepared to join in, so what it has to be is an equal partnership between me and my line manager, where both individuals in that equation join in equally together.
Yeah.
That you're not running around doing everything for me and I'm sitting there doing absolutely nothing, because it's never going to end well. And I think it's really important that we set out clear accountabilities in our businesses, however big or small you are, that say, this is what we can do for you in a business. And okay, we're talking about menopause, but it could be anything else, any other topic. But this is what we expect from you, the individual, at the same time. So if you're going to review any kind of policy or process, I would maybe ask you to consider, what is the culture in your business? Or do some of your people have a belief that they're in a business that's just going to help them to death and they don't have any part to play in any of this?
Yeah. And it's got to be, if I do this for you, what are you going to do in return? Because like you say, if that individual doesn't do anything, then they're going to blame work and go, well, what you're doing isn't helping me. But they've not taken any personal accountability either. So you're absolutely right. You've got to kind of go, actually, I've got to do something to help me because this is affecting me and my life. And
Absolutely.
Yes, great that work are doing that. But what can I do? Because that person might have a husband or a father or kids or whatever. So it's going to affect their home life as well. So It's not everybody else's responsibility to fix you. You've got to kind of
like I say,
accept that you've got to do things to manage this as well.
Yeah, because like I say, unless anybody is working out their 24/7 shifts, I hope not yet. Anyway, no. I mean, who sees what's coming down the line? But menopause is going to be with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what I'm saying is, why would I not want to look after my own health and well-being as well as I could in collaboration with my workplace when I'm there? But I can't divorce myself of any responsibility while you're running around trying to do everything for me. The world doesn't work like that. So it's really important from a business point of view that we understand that we need to set clear accountabilities and talk about those from the minute you're on board and from the minute somebody new joins your business, set out those accountabilities from day one so there's no surprises. Oh, Sharon, I've heard your story. I think what I can do, having heard what you've got to say, yes, why would I not give you a desk fan? Why would I not give you some time off for appointments? But because I'm running a business, I can't afford for Sharon to be doing this for the rest of her working career when she works here. I need to know that you're going to manage your menopause and get back to the position as best as you can that you were before it began. And let me tell you, the brilliant news is I haven't met a woman yet who said, Sharon, in the last 7 years, I've tried everything to manage my menopause and none of it's worked. But many women out there are going to have to take a big accountability check and they're going to have to work pretty hard to help them manage their own health and well-being better, as well as what you're doing in the workplace. It's a joint venture. Yeah,
and I think if they don't manage their own menopause and their employer doesn't support them, that's when we find that all these amazing women in these brilliant positions, they're leaving the workplace, and so therefore there's less women in senior leadership roles. There's less women applying for jobs in that area because they doubt that they are capable of doing it. Or they might have taken a break and then because of the menopause, and then they're looking to get back into work, but they've lost the confidence, they've lost the mojo. So they're not applying. And when we have to kind of look and go, do you know what? There's a lot of gender pay gap reporting at the moment. And there is that disparity, but actually we can improve that. And part of that is looking at why people are leaving. And,
Yeah.
you know, it might be because they've had kids and they want to become a parent and things like that, but it might be because of the menopause. And if you're not supporting them and helping them see that they can find other ways to manage the symptoms and things, then they will leave. And I've heard of doctors leaving the profession, nurses. You know, I've got businesses I've worked with, and there's directors that have left because they don't feel that they can give the job what it needs, because they've lost their knowledge, their power, that like their instincts have completely gone AWOL, and we shouldn't be in that position. And you know, there is so much that we can do as a workforce, whether you are the business leader or colleagues, to just kind of stop. And you said the right thing there, listen.
Yeah, so let me tell you, a story along the lines of what you just said. So I met a woman, it's a pre-pandemic story, but I met this woman, and she had been up to this point as head of a charity. It's quite a large charity in the country. And she'd started in this charity from a very young age. I think she was in her early 20s, and spent the last 30 years absorbed by this charity. And because she was very talented, she'd worked her way up, and she was now the CEO of this charity. And she had obviously been in that position. She had, a secretary, she had a PA, and the PA would, jokingly call her the machine, because this woman would manage on 4 hours sleep a night. She could fly around the world. She was A1. She was totally on the ball, and she was amazing. And then one day she woke up and she was exhausted. She couldn't wake up properly. She felt, her brain was foggy. She couldn't think straight. So she was trying to manage on. And so because she was the type of woman that she was a machine, she quite quickly went to a doctor and said, this is what I'm happening to me. This is how I'm feeling. Interestingly, she was actually 51, which we know, as I've said, is the average age cited as menopause in the UK. So she went to a doctor, told them all these symptoms. He was like, right, I'm going to test you for thyroid. I'm going to test you for all these other things. Menopause was never, ever mentioned. Ever, 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 ever. And it got to a point within less than 6 months, she was paid an enormous salary these days. I was the CEO of this charity. She went, and I felt about myself that I could not do this job to the best of my ability. I knew what I had been doing, and I knew what I was doing now. So she said, I went back to the board within less than 6 months and said, I'm leaving. I'm not worth the money. I can't do the job anymore for whatever reason. 6 months after that, through her own research, and obviously this is where we kind of met up, she realised she was probably in the throes of perimenopause. She'd never heard of it. She said, Sharon, I have 2 degrees. I've got an MBA. I am not a stupid woman. How and why did I not know anything about this stuff? So imagine when she went to her board and when she went to HR to say, I'm leaving, imagine if they had said, hey, Sharon, what do you know about menopause? Or imagine if they'd done some menopause education in that organisation, what different perspective she might have had, what different perspective those around her would have had. And they could have avoided losing that dedicated individual who dedicated nearly their whole working life to this particular charity and was absolutely brilliant up until this point of what she'd done. But she left. And this is happening, whether it's Joan on the checkout, whether it's your administrator, it's happening up and down the country at all levels in business, and it's happening out of utter ignorance. And that is why I created Miss Menopause, just to enable menopause to become business as usual and to avoid that happening. Because although you might lose the head, you might lose the body, and you could replace the body with another body, but can you replace the experience that you've just lost?
It's the knowledge and the skills. Yeah. And in a world where we have a massive skill shortage, no business out there can afford to lose somebody that a simple conversation can keep them.
But why would you want to if you knew that it could be as simple as educating yourself, educating those people in your business, and you could avoid that? Why would you not want to do that? Because ultimately, if we're talking business language, it's impacting your bottom line. So the cost of recruitment is huge. the cost of training and retention. So if you think about, it's something ridiculous, like it could cost you 30 grand to recruit a new person. By the time you've recruited them, trained them, give them the opportunity to upskill themselves, get them, how many of them will hit the ground running? Well, probably not a lot of people. So why would you want to lose a good quality employee? And remember, this isn't just women, of a certain age. These are your male colleagues who maybe you're saying they're anxious, worried and concerned. They're now not sleeping very well. They've become a health and safety risk. Maybe you take them down a disciplinary route because John's no longer seem to be on the ball. But really, the root cause could be sleep deprived because he's living at home with a menopausal wife, partner and girlfriend.
It could be struggling with his mental health because his marriage is breaking down.
Yes.
And he doesn't want to talk about it because he doesn't know why his wife suddenly turned into this whole new human being, and it's affecting him at work because his mental health is affecting him. So it affects men and women alike. And I think a lot of people forget that what's going on at home and personally will impact you at work. And as an employer, that will affect your bottom line. You said it right before. You have a duty of care to make sure your people are okay. And the best quote I always see is the Richard Branson one. If you look after your people, they will look after your customers. So you've got to absolutely focus on your people. And in the world that we're in now, you've got to do everything within your power to be an employer of choice. Yes. And whether that's trying to attract people to come and work for you or retain the good ones that you've got, you've really, really got to work hard at it. And actually doing a lot of the things that we've talked about today. There's some simple things, like you say, the reasonable adjustments don't have to cost a lot or actually probably are free. And it's just thinking outside the box and talking and listening. Don't cost anything.
No. And again, I always find it really amusing when, when I'm working, I obviously work with managers a lot. And they say, but Sharon, what do I say? I said, the really best thing you can do is when you're sitting down with any individual, because every unique story comes from every unique individual, is to say to me, Sharon, I've heard your story. What small, reasonable things do you think I might be able to do for you? And I'll probably tell you.
Yeah.
And how transformational is that if you just ask me? So never forget that you can ask me. But remember, you're going to say, right, Sharon, of course I could do that for you. But menopause, we learned, we went on a session last week, last month, last year, and we both learned that this could go on forever and ever. We just don't know. So, what are you going to do? So I'm going to do this right now at this, but what are you going to do at the same time to get back the quality of life that you deserve?
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think that's it. It's working together, having check-ins, talking to each other, listening, and kind of going on that journey with them to make sure that they're okay. Whether that is the men or the women in your business, you want to make sure that they're okay. Because if you look after them, their productivity will increase eventually.
And they look after, like you say, they look after you and your customers, which makes you, is the lifeblood of your business. So a little bit of investment can go an awful long way.
Absolutely. Do you know, we could talk about this forever. I feel like if I had a week, we still wouldn't scratch the surface. No. But it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today and hearing all these amazing stories. And when we get the pod out for people to listen and watch, your details will be there so they can follow you on LinkedIn or they can get in touch. But thank you so much, Sharon, for today.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.